Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily News. I'm Nicholas Richardson. The Immigration Pact, or the distribution of migrants to European Union countries in the name of compulsory solidarity, may mean a reduction in the security of citizens in Poland, especially given what we see on the streets of Germany, France or Sweden, which had an open-door policy, and this does not fill us with optimism. Illegal immigrants who refuse to assimilate may become a threat to Poles in the future. Almost every day we receive information that reveals problems with the assimilation of immigrants in Europe. Despite the European Union's open migration policy, the problems are becoming worse. These are, first of all, security threats. This can be seen in all the statistics. For example, rape in France, there are 25 times more than in Poland. And there is a similar ratio inside France. I mean, France in the 1970s and France today. They are completely different countries. In recent days, there have been several attacks by foreigners trying to illegally cross the Polish border on soldiers and border guards of Poland. This is just a drop in the ocean compared to what is happening in Western Europe. Germans are in further shock after Friday's knife attack in Mannheim. The attacker injured 6 people, including an intervening police officer whom he stabbed in the throat. The officer died of his wounds. The perpetrator of the tragedy turned out to be a 25-year-old Afghan who had been living in Germany since 2014. I'm deeply shocked by the death of a police officer who courageously intervened in Mannheim to protect human life. Less than 2 months ago, the tragedy unfolded of a 39-year-old Polish man in Sweden who was brutally shot dead in front of his son. The teenagers who were detained in connection with the case, 17-year-old Yasin Z and 18-year-old Nasima B, have Swedish citizenship. But from Sweden, they are not. In France last year, on the other hand, a 31-year-old man attacked children playing in a playground. He stabbed 4 preschool-aged children and 2 adults. The perpetrator turned out to be a Syrian who had previously sought asylum in France. Will the scenes we see in our Western neighbours soon be our everyday reality in Poland? Do we need to fear for our safety and that of our loved ones? The Immigration Pact leaves many unknowns, and politicians of the ruling party do not leave clear answers as to what the future of our country will look like. Marcin Bakalarski, TV Republica. The President disagrees with the Foreign Ministry's ambassadorial nominations. He is clear about his opposition to sending Bogdan Klich to the United States and Richard Schnepf, most likely to Italy. The President has announced that he will not sign any of the nominations of the members of the so-called Conference of Ambassadors. Why, despite this, does the Foreign Ministry want to change ambassadors in other countries, bypassing the presidential prerogative?
There is
a clear presidential declaration that there will be no signature on the ambassadorial appointments of Bogdan Klich and Richard Schnepf, directed to the United States and Europe respectively. Why is the Foreign Ministry overlooking the President's prerogative in this matter? Let's take a closer look. Minister Radosław Sikorski wants to recall Ambassador Pilecka, who is a younger relative of Romisz Pilecki, from the embassy in Lisbon, but very much wants to send as Polish ambassador Mr. Schnepf, whose father, along with the Soviets, participated in the Augustów manhunt against Poles. Richard Schnepf is headed to Rome, where Ambassador Anna Maria Anders has already completed her mission. There has been even more excitement about Bogdan Klich's candidacy for ambassador to the United States. The man who was then Poland's Minister of National Defense when the President of Poland died in a plane crash on a Polish government plane. The guy who was then in charge of the Polish military. They want to send to the United States. After all, it will be one big wretch. As long as I am still president for these 14 months, I will never sign this ambassadorial appointment. The foreign minister responded on social media. I declare again that if Law and Justice has proof of Senator Klich's involvement in the Smolensk assassination, then he will not go to the United States but to detention. On the other hand, I remind you that for following procedures, Law and Justice politicians accused the pilots of cowardice and Klich gave a medal. Who was right? Mr. Bogdan Klich is one of the key people who are suspected of obfuscation in the investigation after the Smolensk crash. And it was the first days after the disaster that were key to gaining knowledge. Foreign Ministry appointees clearly symbolize the government's policy, which the President cannot agree to. Confrontational reality, the only independent centre of power that the President represents. It is also an obvious omission of the presidential palace in foreign policy. This is an unprecedented unprecedented situation that could result in the downgrading of Polish representatives in the world. But it's also an attempt to bypass the president's constitutional prerogative. This is a clear violation of the Constitution, which clearly states in Article 131 about the presidential prerogative as well as the Foreign Service Act. In addition, it is dangerous to the image of Poland in the world. The government seems to have forgotten the interests of the Polish state in this matter. Edyta Holdinska, TV Republica. The composition of the Government Commission to investigate Russian influence in Poland has been unveiled. It includes 12 people, among them Bartosz Machalica, a member of the IPN Collegium, the man who headed the team that published the so-called Red Book, essential historical book of the left, where we read, among other things, about the liberation of Poland by the Soviet Union. The chairman of the commission is General Jarosław Strojik, the head of the military counterintelligence service. It is unclear whether the commission will also look into Russian influence during the reset of relations with Russia implemented by Donald Tusk's first government. The commission's first report is expected to be released in 60 days. The commission is to be impartial and expert, to keep an eye on and obey all those who would like to make a tool for internal political struggle out of such matters. All the independent and apolitical experts who are to sit on the commission have been named by the Donald Tusk-led government. The chairman of the commission will be the current head of military counterintelligence service, General Jarosław Strujik, who began his career in the military information services. In addition to him, the 13th December cabinet named 11 experts. Interestingly, some of the members of Donald Tusk's commission have not previously dealt with the issue of Russian services. I'm thinking, for example, of Mr. Professor Motyka, only that he is, after all, a specialist in Polish-Ukrainian issues and that of the World War II period. Colonel Pavel Bialek, a member of the so-called Krakow Group, has joined the commission to investigate Russian influence. During the PO-PSL government, he was deputy head of the ABW, responsible for protecting Poland's economic interests. At that time, for example, WM Kantor entered Polish chemistry, or gas contracts were signed with Gazprom. Donald Tusk delegated to the commission, pretending to be anti-Russian, Mrs. Irena Lipovich, daughter of Edmund Lipovich, a UB functionary in Leszno, bravely building socialism in communist Poland and then Polish-German reconciliation, valued at many thousands of Berlin euros. What does she know about Russia? When I look at the composition of this composition, an old Latin saying comes to mind. Doctor, cure yourself. Cezary Gmisz, an investigative journalist who has been exposing special services cases for years, is unlikely to doubt the performance of the commission appointed by the Tusk government. As it seems, this is a commission that will act on political orders, trying to make the previous governments, i.e. the United Right governments, into Russian agents. Despite the announcement by Donald Tusk that he will not influence the actions of his experts, the head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration and coordinator of special services, Thomas Siemioniak, has already revealed some of the topics it has to deal with. Many doubts have been raised about record coal imports from Russia under the Law and Justice government. Experts are to work at the Ministry of Justice headquarters on classified documents. The question should be asked whether those who have been appointed to the Commission to investigate Russian and Belarusian influence, whether they have access to classified information, and if they do not, it should be noted that the procedure for granting such certification takes up to a dozen months. According to Donald Tusk, the report of his commission is expected to be produced within 60 days. This would include the time needed to obtain access to classified materials for experts designated by government departments. We are dealing with a composition that in part should itself be investigated for Russian influence. There are people there who were involved to some degree in the reset process with Russia. General Marek Tukaczewski, an officer of the military intelligence of the People's Republic of Poland and a participant in Soviet military intelligence courses in Moscow, later the last head of the military information services, who were liquidated by Antony Macierewicz, had already offered his help with the work of the Tusk Commission. To put this together, no problem. We will also find people. The question is whether the new commission will also look into the details of the reset with Russia under the previous Donald Tusk government. At the time when the great Europeans, for example Germany and others, said that one must be friendly with Russia, then Mr. Donald Tusk and his people were friendly with Russia, hugging Vladimir Putin, walking with him on the pier. Then he was a welcome guest here. And when he frontally invaded Ukraine, it turned out that unfortunately you can no longer be friends with Vladimir Putin. And also the matter of the continuing operation from 2008 to 2014, and later the signed agreement between the Military Counterintelligence Service, supervised by Donald Tusk, and the Military Counterintelligence of the Federal Security Service of Russia. This case is so incriminating for Tusk at the moment that he is making attempts with the help of people who, in the construction of cooperation with Russian special services, participated. One of the architects of this cooperation, Krzysztof Dusha, as joined Donald Tusk's first government, today is deputy head of the military counterintelligence service and at the same time head of Donald Tusk's expert commission. This is what we asked the Prime Minister. And Deputy General Struzik, I'm asking you about Colonel Krzysztof Dusha, who participated at the time in the arrangement between the military counterintelligence service and the Federal Security Service. Republic already has the findings of this committee. There was even the issue of the agreement you agreed to, Mr. Prime Minister. Donald Tusk's wars on Russian spies is officially open. Radosław Jankiewicz, TV Republika.
United States President Joe Biden has begun a 5-day visit to France. Today he met French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, and in the following days he will attend the 80th anniversary of the Allied D-Day landings in Normandy and meet French President Emmanuel Macron and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
United States President Joe Biden flew to France to attend the 80th anniversary of D-Day, or Operation Overlord Normandy landings, commemorating the events of June 1944, when United States and Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of German-occupied France. The Normandy landings made possible the opening of the Western Front. D-Day celebrations also took place on the British side. Rishi Sunak's election campaign and King Charles's convalescence from cancer were halted for 48 hours, as both joined veterans to mark the 80th anniversary of the invasion on both sides of the English Channel.
Let us once again commit ourselves always to remember, cherish and honour those who served that day and to live up to the freedom they died for by balancing rights with civic responsibilities to our country. For we are all eternally in their debt.
22 veterans took a ferry from Portsmouth to relive the journey they made as part of the largest invasion army landing in history. King Charles also took part in a commemorative BBC film in which he and the Queen met the veterans and read aloud his grandfather's war diaries.
That's the news. Thank you for watching, and from me it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.